Welcome. You are in the Exchange Connection session for AI and Ed Policy. My name is Leah. I am the tech facilitator. I'm also part of Circle's staff. You'll be hearing from me throughout. Let me know if you have any questions, technical difficulties, anything like that. So an expertise connection session was designed for the Circles community to exchange expertise on a topic, to share information and examples with participants who want to learn more about the topic, to provide a forum for participants to discuss how they might incorporate the topic into their work, as well as broker connections between community members around the topic. So as you go through the session, I hope we'll all get a chance to learn from each other and think about what to do to take to these strategy sessions tomorrow. We'll start making plans for how we can remake broadening even more. So I'm going to turn it over to Erin to introduce the session and get us started.
Awesome. And Leah, are you going to share your screen too? Well, hi, everybody. Welcome. I'm Erin Walker. I'm at the University of Pittsburgh. And I'm sure everybody is still reflecting on that powerful keynote and panel. So it would be great, I think, to keep that discussion going throughout this session, too, thinking about how AI and educational technologies are sort of perpetuating systems of oppression and ways that we can use policy to affect structural change. So I'd love to revisit that in the discussion that we'll have at the end of this session. So we're here to talk about our work in the AI working groups on AI and education policy. You can go to the next slide, Leah. So Leah already introduced herself. I introduced myself. We held a Circles AI and Education Policy Working Group from March through July. And at any given point in time, we had 14 through 29 members over the course of 7 meetings representing a variety of stakeholders. So K-12 education, industry, academic faculty, also graduate students. And the goal was to bring together multiple stakeholders to discuss AI and education topics related to policy and really think about ways that we might be able to affect meaningful change. So just to give everybody sort of a sense of how this worked, in March and April, we had a kickoff and then a learning phase where we talked about policy and how to construct policy initiatives at the national and international levels, at the state level. We also had an educator panel and discussed some initiatives going on in industry with respect to the EdTech Equity Toolkit. And then in May through August, we went through a phase where we broke off into small groups and started developing small group initiatives. And that's what you'll hear about today. And here we are at the Circles convening, sharing out about what we've done and hopefully, getting a lot of feedback and having a healthy discussion surrounding all these initiatives. And just to give you a sense of what happened during those meetings, we did bring in quite a few speakers to facilitate these discussions, both at the national and international levels, at the state level, and an educator panel. So there was a lot of expertise exchange going on in these sessions as well. And we also moved towards some particular concrete outcomes from the session. So one thing is the reading list. I think Leah posted a link in the chat, and this is a set of curated policy resources from group members. We annotated it as published on the Circles website. So if you want to learn about AI and education policy, the reading list is a really great place to start. We have a pending CACM blog post that we're working on to talk about some of the discussions that were had in the sessions. And we also did some synthesis based on the discussions that we had to extract particular policy themes and to formulate these policy initiatives. So you'll be hearing a lot more about that today as well. So I'll turn it over to Leah now to talk a little bit more specifically about some of the outcomes of these sessions.
Yeah, so just to lead into what we're going to be working on and talking about today, as part of the sessions, it kind of became clear that there are these different levels of enacting policy change. So kind of on the higher level, we talked about different federal or international recommendations that there are out there, heard from some speakers on that. Often these tend to be kind of recommendations and not so much enforceable policies, and include things like the National Ed Tech Plan, which Casey, who's on the call today, is a part of working on, as well as the Global Ethical Framework for AI in Education, who actually Joseph Valerie, who's on the call today, is part of working on. Then kind of a level down, we talked a little more about state and local policies, and how these kind of go to more of an enforceable framework. They tend to be either on a state level or even lower, down on a local or district level. And in the session itself, we talked about certain bills that were being passed in Illinois for CS education. And then down to district level changes on the school level. These can include things like funding decisions, district policies, positions, administrative positions that can affect whether or not, certain AI and education decisions get made, and enforcement on that level kind of varies. And then there's this different level that kind of cuts across all of these, more on the pledge and product certification side, that can come from a whole variety of NGOs or nonprofits. Trisha, who's on the call, is part of creating a product pledge, and so we heard about that in our sessions. And they can also vary in how enforceable they are. And so to lead into hearing about the initiatives, we had 3 kind of key policy initiatives come out of the AI and Education Policy Working Group in Circles. So our first was an AI in Educational Technology Vendor Pledge. So you'll hear about that. Second was an AI and Educational Technology Policy Brief.
Looks like Leia's frozen.
So Trisha Colella is the Director of Global Product Partnerships at Digital Promise. She'll be presenting on that first initiative. David Jarboe is the Director of Instructional Technology and STEAM at Harrison School District 2. Will be presenting on that second initiative. And Tanner Jackson and Deblina will be presenting on the third. Deblina Pacquiao will be presenting on the third. Tanner is the Senior Director of AI Research and Data Science at the Educational Testing Service. And Deblina is the Associate Director of Education at the Computer History Museum. And so with that, I'm going to pass it over to Trisha to talk about the first initiative.
Great, thank you. I'll go ahead and share my screen then.
And I can share as well, Trisha.
This is fine. Can everyone see it? Okay, great. So let me go ahead and just present. Okay, so I was part of the first initiative where we were focusing on the AI for EdTech vendors and essentially really honing in on a product pledge. So that's what I'll be sharing today. And it wouldn't be possible without the fantastic collaboration of all of these folks. So I wanted to make sure we honored their contributions. I'm just sharing what we all have done. So everything that we're sharing today has been aligned to existing foundational work and heavily inspired by some of the other pledges that already exist. And so I'll share why we ended up landing on a pledge versus some other layer or level, as Leia has shared. And I think a lot of it comes down to really looking at the purpose and what we could actually do with it. And so when we're talking about the student privacy compass, the privacy pledge, Project Unicorn was very much influential, the work in Equal AI, and then the edtechequity.org. So those were some of the foundational pieces that really helped us frame our work. So then the question is, well, why a pledge? Out of all of the different things we could have done, why not a policy? Why not? We really believe in this. So why would we only have a pledge? And so what we've tried to do is outline a continuum to show why the pledge was exactly just right at this moment in time. So the first step really is just to build the awareness that so that any school districts or any type of educational leaders who are selecting ed tech products are able to actually consider the questions to ask. And do they really realize what ed tech products are even using AI? And to what extent is that AI being used? And so at first it's to build awareness. And then we want the ed tech companies to agree, yes, we value all of this and we should make all of this available. So then we landed, well, for us to actually have something that would really be a signal to the market, a pledge is just right, because the pledge will actually add in a layer of internal accountability. As you go up the layers and deepen the levels, there's an increased amount of external accountability. So we wanted that space that was really on the internal accountability that builds awareness for the market, that has a signal for what agreements are actually in place, but really is an agreement with a pledge that could be publicly facing and that would actually be able to hone in on what the agreements are. So yes, awareness, yes, agreement, here's a pledge. And then the next step we're hoping for is that the pledge could then be incorporated into some type of future product certifications around AI. And then later there would be a mandate, which would be externally enforceable. So that's what we landed on the pledge. In our pledge, we have 4 key value commitments that we are asking EdTech vendors to consider, number 1, be aware of, and agree to, and then sign the pledge for these 4 spaces. And they hover around transparency, accountability, ensuring that they're really truly designing with the folks they're designing it for, so inclusivity, and open communication, ideally with some publicly facing information so that everyone really does truly have that awareness and the internal accountability is visible to external partners or purchasers. And so the first value commitment that we're asking in the pledge is that they value including underserved and underrepresented groups in the design, development, deployment, and continuous monitoring of the AI educational technology. So do you actually include the folks you're trying to design for in just the beginning of the process, or is this an ongoing element of the design of your AI in your EdTech product? And so we really value that. Another value commitment is that the students, teachers, and administrators are informed when AI decisions are being made that affect their educational lives. And this is the piece we had a lot of conversations around. We had many advisors come in and share their input around this because we really felt that there's still a growing need for awareness. A lot of products are saying they're using AI, but there's really a lot of folks aren't quite sure exactly, are they really using AI or is everyone just using AI now? And at what point is the depth of the AI incorporation into the EdTech product going to be part of the relevant conversation? And so we really wanted to make sure that everyone is highly informed that in these specific cases of using this EdTech tool, that AI is making the decisions. And so we want everyone to have that level of awareness. The third value commitment is that we value promoting student, teacher, and parental control and agency. So really, it's empowering the users, whoever they might be, empowering all stakeholders to understand that they do have meaningful choices when AI is being utilized. So questions like, can I override the AI at some point if I don't believe it's accurate? Can I provide feedback back to the EdTech company so that they understand that this actually is taking a student or a child down a different road? So really building in that empowerment for the control and agency. And the fourth value commitment is that we value the work that other regulating agencies have already done to promote ethical AI and will comply with all of the rules. So these are the COPA, the FERPA, all of the different laws and official policies that are externally facing. Those are all embedded in this pledge. So we acknowledge and follow these rules and policies and legal requirements. In addition to that, we also promote ethical AI. So those are the 4 value commitments that are embedded in the Tech and AI pledge. And so now we come to the why and the how of the intended audiences. So who are we trying to target with this pledge? Obviously, that tech products would be our main target, but the reason is most important. So what we're really trying to do is ensure that they can publicly commit to making values related to AI development and use visible. So they're publicly saying, we agree to this, we pledge that we will do X, Y, Z, and ideally they will showcase this on their website and in their marketing material. And so how will they do it? They'll sign the pledge, include the commitment on the website, and again, like the marketing material. Then we have the educational stakeholders who we also want to ensure that they understand which ed tech products have AI and why it matters and what are they pledging to do. So this is to build awareness. And the how is that they would be able to go on some type of either a publicly facing web page and or look at any of the materials that are provided, and they would have a lot of their questions answered. It also would serve as a bar for vetting and selecting those products that are using AI. And finally, certification creators. So when the product certifications are being created and badges and any other types of publicly facing signals to make sure that there's a consistent, specific, comprehensible, and relevant foundational agreement in there, it'd be really powerful in our vision to have this pledge as a foundational element of any future product certifications that incorporate AI. And finally, this would happen by them having the pledge being added as a base level expectation in any type of competency-based product certifications related to ed tech tools using AI. So those are the ideas and the thinking around the development of this pledge, and we are open to and are requesting your thoughts, ideas, and questions because we value your input. And now I will pass it on to the second initiative.
I think we have a second for maybe one question, and then we can always circle back to it if there are more questions after that before we pass on to the second. So is there any questions?
Joe has a question in the chat.
I see a great question here. Thanks, Joe. Are we considering recertification as the technology transforms? We've had a lot of conversation around that, and definitely we're thinking about there will need to be some type of a timeline on this because the acceleration of edtech development will definitely outpace the level of the pledge at some point, which is ideal because then what we can do is we can raise the bar of the pledge itself, and then the pledge can be embedded into even further certification. So yes, we would encourage any product certifications to have a recertification process that would then embed and raise the bar.
Leah, do we have time to answer? So there are two more questions in the chat. That seems like we could talk about those and then we could move on to the second presentation.
I see a question from Jeremy. Do we have a plan to get this out there? Well, that is why we are here. Partially is that we are seeking input and ideas on how we could better spread the pledge, how we can continue to iterate upon it to make it as rich as possible, and then who all is out there that we could share this with. Ideally, anyone who sees the value in a pledge that would love to join the efforts. Thank you for your question.
And then we have one more from Amanda, how to ensure that stakeholders are actually following the pledge.
That's a great question. We've had a lot of conversation around as well. I think that's why we went back and forth between the type of a certification or a pledge. A certification would have that evidence. A pledge, we would be able to at least have some type of an expectation. There would be something publicly facing, something grounded where you could actually see they're doing it. So whether it would be on a website, marketing material, conversations, etc. But by having it at the pledge level, we actually have the opportunity to be incorporated into many different certifications, many different badges across many different organizations. And so that opens up that opportunity to have it more broadly incorporated. So hopefully that piece, by being in that space, any level of evidence being required at a higher level, whether it's product certification or policy, would then be able to be built on the pledge. It really, one last thing, it really was meant to be that entry level internal accountability before we got to something that was an external accountability.
All right, so we'll have time for more discussion about it in a bit, but now I'm going to pass it to Dave to talk about the second initiative. Dave, would you like me to share your slides, or you got it?
I think, can people see them? Wait.
Yep.
All right. I have 3 screens going, so I just have to keep track of. You guys are over here now, so. So group 2 kind of is talking about the next level and the external processes that might need to take place outside of the pledge. We kind of talked a lot about the predecessors or parallel similar initiatives that have come across as far as SIPA, COPA, and FERPA, which, you know, until, for some people, until something has teeth or funding attached, it's a good to know, but not a need to know or have to do. So that's kind of the angle that we went with as far as looking at how we could approach the actual policy and make recommendations. And there was a lot of discussion, like we shared earlier. This was over, I think, 4 to 5 months that we met at different times, and really trying to narrow our focus because AI can be so broad. And so we decided, you know, our key audience was going to be legislatures, whether that's at the state or federal level, because that's really where policies become practice. If something, you know, doesn't happen at that level and you're hitting every district independently, it's a pretty shotgun approach to a policy. So really, until you know, governing body says this is what you need to do, people aren't necessarily going to join in. So that's where we were looking at, is how could we encourage legislatures to take action. So we came up with a call to action. First, it was just about, you know, understanding AI and how it is becoming part of education. Later on, I'll share 10 points, but one of the concepts is AI is everywhere now. I mean, you go anywhere from a car to a refrigerator to you know, something you buy at Home Depot, you're going to see an AI label on it. Everything's, you know, got artificial intelligence. So really, we had to talk about what does that mean for education, and we talked about how the potential there for education is to improve, personalize, and individualize learning to increase student achievement. That would be the outcome. Also, that with that becomes some risk, and we've seen that play out already in other industries, but also in education, where sometimes something really good and positive and innovative comes in, but without a lot of, you know, groundwork laid and forethought put into it, sometimes there's unintentional or harmful risks that can happen. And so we wanted to address the bias that can happen in AI, misguidance, and also inequity. Those are kind of the key things we focused on. So that was our call to action. Under the policy recommendations, we know it's going to happen. This conference and, you know, some of the workshops I attended earlier, it's like a lot of kind of an undertone message was teachers don't really know what's coming. Administrators, you know, at the school levels don't really know what's coming. So really, we need to get ahead of that. And so that's where our call to action is to begin to provide some guardrails where required to limit potential harms that could come with this implementation. And again, as said earlier, because it is happening so fast. So we wanted to define three major ideas. One was the determination of who will use AI and for what purposes. Because we know sometimes education is just seen as a market for profit, and that is the motivation. So our policy would look at how do we ensure that that's not the only thing driving AI in education. Again, laying the groundwork. What can we do for professionals, from the building level, administration level, to school boards, to prepare them for this technology and how it can be implemented effectively. And then again, a major emphasis was how do we protect students in regard to possible uses for AI. And again, going back to some of those ideas that to make sure that we're not setting up situations where harm could take place. So we came up with 10 factors that we would like legislators to look at in thinking of the audience, again, trying to clarify our purpose and really focus it on education. So really the first factor was to define AI in terms of P20 educational settings, that it's because there's so much human interaction tied to the AI that happens in education, and that we are interfacing with children at a lot of points, a lot of touch points with children, that we need an extra layer. It's not just machine learning deciding how a factory needs to make widgets faster. We're actually interacting with humans and having that human to machine interface. And that was the second factor, to really have that clear understanding and to make sure that people are really looking at what are the appropriate expectations from this technology. It's not the miracle that's going to solve all issues and make teaching just a wonderful experience. There are some absolutely wonderful things that AI could do for education, but really making sure that people have a clear understanding of what is possible and what's not possible when it comes to AI. Also looking at and understanding what the social impacts could be, looking at how does it really improve education? What does it do for teacher efficacy and student efficacy as far as student voice and choice? There's, again, a lot of potential there, but making sure that there's an understanding of what those outcomes could be. Again, defining a clear purpose of what AI technology should be and what it should not be, especially when it comes to how it's used to make decisions for children. Identify specific predicted outcomes. Again, so there's a clear understanding by the end user, by the regulators, by the companies. So everyone's on the same page as far as what is our goal in implementing AI. AI is not to be used to do market research on children's and family and use machine learning to target advertising. That is a non-purpose for AI in education, although we have seen those things happen with companies in dealing with children in some instances. Another major key area was looking at really analyzing what are the possibilities for bias as far as how it intersects with race, class, gender, age, abilities. We know this technology is going to be leveraged to make decisions, to make predictions, to guide teachers and families and students. So to make sure that, and not getting too technical, looking at the elements that go into AI and how it could affect those outcomes. We also wanted to talk about the boundaries, ethical boundaries around AI. In an earlier session I attended, it was the discussion of, teachers, are they just going to kick back and let AI run their classrooms, or do we need to have that human interface and still making that human touch with children. Looking at how the predictive models, machine learning, the algorithms, really those need to be upfront and clear so that people are safeguarded in knowing when they're interacting with AI, what is the goal, what is the outcome. We're not wanting there to be, hidden algorithms. It should all be transparent so that, families know what their children are experiencing when they're interacting with products that have an element of AI in it. Just like FERPA does as far as data privacy, because this is new and this is in the cloud, a lot of it, really understanding who owns the data, where is the data, how is it being secured, and again, what is being done with that data outside of its stated purpose. Another important element, again, bringing the family and the student and the community in, board members, so that they know what the AI is trying to achieve. That kind of goes back, elements of that are in the pledge to make sure that there is that transparency so people can gain a trust, because we know that when it comes to any new innovative technology, there can be this hesitancy of, well, I don't know if I want that AI, in my classroom, because I don't really know what it's doing. So we need to make sure that there is an effort put forth to make sure that there is that transparency, that clarity of what's happening behind the scenes. Again, looking at impacts as far as the legislative measures, we don't want to, restrict the technology so much that it can't be used, because that could be, if we become over restrictive, over regulated, that could create a problem in and of itself, and we could miss out on some of the potential good that could take place. So really coming up with that balance of regulation, cooperation, and transparency, which was the last one too, around transparency, is really understanding, where's the funding coming from, who is sponsoring these efforts around AI. I think that's just important to know, because there were earlier today, there's a session, 3 initiatives around AI, which is great. They were research-based and really trying to get the work of AI out into the community and make it productive, but really stepping back and saying, okay, that's good, but now how is that being funded? And is there some favoritism being shown to a certain segment, that maybe because some AI features can be monetized and have a greater potential for profit, versus some other uses and research that needs to be done in areas that actually may be much better for education, but not as great a return. So how do we make sure that, the AI isn't being kind of steered in a way that might become inequitable for some institutions, some people? So those are the 10 factors. I'm going to pause there and just see, we would love your feedback. If you have any ideas that we missed, because we started large and did kind of pare it down and try to summarize the factors that we felt were important, but I would love to hear your feedback on these factors, any that surprised you, any that were, your priorities, kind of on the same page, or something that maybe we missed. So I'd like to throw it out to the group.
Dave, I'm wondering a little bit, because I don't know, honestly, who in a school district would use these factors? Like, what would they have to do? Like, do they have to be constituted as a group, or does a suitable group exist? I just don't know.
So our target was legislators. So
Okay, legislators.
So really it's looking at helping them to have an understanding and really, like I said at the very beginning, creating those guardrails for the implementation, akin to what FERPA did around family records, what SIPA did around protection of students. So that's kind of the angle that we were taking.
Great, thanks.
Mhm.
I would ask then with that, so can these be used by state boards of education or local school boards that are also developing policy to be able, and most of these people have little understanding of what AI is or how it's going to impact kids. So will they be able to use this and develop that guide list for a decision-making process as they're reaching out to vendors and purchasing new product?
Absolutely, and I think group 3 will talk a little bit about that, and later on I have some additional resources, because you're right, this is a huge effort, just in education around AI in and of itself, because I think there's a lot of potential for misunderstanding about what AI is in education versus what AI is in other industries. So yes, it certainly could be at the local level, but we also discussed how really for anything to get large traction, it's probably going to start at the legislative level.
I think that's a great transition actually to group 3, who focused a lot more on kind of AI literacy initiatives. And so I'm going to pass it to Deblina and Tanner.
Great,
Thank
thank
you.
you. I will try to share my screen once Dave pulls us down. Great. Okay, can you all see my screen?
Yep.
Great. Yeah, so thanks everybody. So we are the third group focusing on school policies for integrating AI inside the classroom. So while Deblina and I are the ones talking this afternoon, I mean, this was a larger group, and we have some thanks for the people who helped to contribute to this effort later on in the slides. Our brief really focused on teaching with AI and data privacy and use. So what we are not necessarily addressing as much of is how to teach about AI, like AI literacy in that sense. But for those teachers and educators who do have to use AI in their classrooms and instructional practices, and what kind of data and privacy use is associated with that. So in the brief, we talk a little bit about some of the implementation responsibilities for educators, what parts are in their direct control, what parts are outside of the direct control, some of the elements of AI technology that they need to be aware of, and then be able to leverage within their practices. Some of the specific things that we talk about are the evidence and transparency related to the intended goals of that software. What is it trying to accomplish? Under what constraints should it be implemented? How was it originally developed? For what kind of data or populations is it validated? And then also system decision making, as Trisha mentioned, can they override this decision based on the system if they disagree with it? So making sure that those kinds of aspects are documented and shared out so that people can make informed decisions. Additionally, looking at the data use. So how will all of the data being used, not only by the students, but by the teachers? So if the teacher is acting inside the system, what parts of their actions are being tracked? What kinds of PII is being taken by the system? Both the intended and unintended uses, and then some of the access and sharing of that data with third parties. So we bring up all of these issues mostly to discuss within the context. You have the AI developers who are putting these together. In group 2, they were talking about some of the lobbying for legislators and these guidelines. And then in this group, we were really talking about these teachers and schools and districts, how they're actually making use of it as part of their instruction. And so based off of some of these issues that I just mentioned and how we're putting all this together, we started to make some recommendations for some of these parties. And Deblini is going to carry forward and talk a little bit about those.
Thank you, Tanner. Can we move on to the next slide, please? Great. So now that Tanner has already given you a little bit overview about what we were working on this policy brief, as well as introduction to the various stakeholders we focused on for this policy brief, I will give you a little bit more in depth about the recommended stakeholder responsibilities that we have come up with. The first group we will be talking about are the legislators. So one of the primary responsibilities recommendations for the legislators is to really help promote and scale the effects of the policy, through maybe set up through local or district or even statewide processes that could provide consumers with reasonable protections from predatory practices, which could include data privacy and use, but it's not limited to that. Legislators are also encouraged to create a regulatory agency to govern and safeguard both the companies and the consumers. Next slide, please. Now, moving on to the next group of stakeholders, which are the AI developers, companies, and researchers. So just to understand that perspective from their end is for the consumers to really better understand and interpret AI systems, overall development aspects, it is really encouraged that AI developers and companies inform the end users about how the data will be used and how AI was actually being trained. So they should report on any applicable constraints as well as ethical practices they have incorporated and what is the context of the use. We also encourage them to conduct research and provide really transparent reports on the system's effectiveness in the classroom, as well as any kind of underlying pedagogical approaches they might have used so that educators can efficiently implement it in the classroom. Moving on with the AI researchers, currently there are existing silos in research and practice. So really what we want to do is we want to bridge the gap. And the most important factor in that is the AI researchers actually partner with the developers to advise them on a variety of research strands, which could include product evaluation, product development based on ethical practices, and impact of scale and reach. To really break these silos and ensure that there is transparency and promote equity and inclusion in AI research, what we are recommending is that researchers also connect with education practitioners and communicate with them regarding the innovative practices and research findings. Either it could be through blogs, newsletters, reports, through partnerships, and so on and so forth. Next slide, please. Last but not the least, this is our focus area. We want to focus on the district, schools, and teachers. So just in the absence of other policies, what we are recommending is schools and districts are really encouraged to create and enforce policies to provide teachers, students, and families with reasonable protections from predatory practices, including, but not again limited to, data privacy and use. That's one of our main focuses here. But special attention definitely needs to be focused on teacher training for them to better understand and be informed about the AI systems, any kind of ethical practices and product integration, and their associated risks and benefits as well. For the educators or the teachers, it is extremely important for them to understand appropriate use of technology in the classroom, because in the recent past, we have seen that there is a lot of AI-based classroom tools that are being implemented, and they're very common, and they also help with interactive learning. And that's why it's very important that they not only understand the technology, but there's also ongoing training regarding that. So, considering all these factors, that it is really important for educators to, again, understand the AI technology, but also promote equitable educational practices when they are integrating these systems in the classroom. So just to give you an overview of what we really are proposing is that for an effective implementation of AI in education, the only way moving forward, how we see is that there needs to be a team effort from all these various stakeholders. So next slide, please. And this comes to the end of our presentation. This is our contributor list. They're amazing. So big shout out to all of them. Thank you. And thank you all for attending the session. And we're really looking forward to your feedback and suggestions on our policy brief. And I will give it to Leah now. Thank you.
Yeah, so we'll open the floor to questions specific to Tanner and Deblina, or just discussions in general about the 3 initiatives. And I think that's something that we're all looking for, is kind of where do we go next with this? And so with that, I'll open the floor. And I'm also posting a link in the chat to a folder where you can find PDFs of all of the initiatives.
So let's start with any questions or comments, or even feedback specific to Tanner and Deblina.
Well, I'll give myself some feedback. I mean, it sounds like, I mean, based on what we've done across these 3 groups, it sounds like we should also look at, you know, some of the connections across there. Like, I know that we are making reference to group 2 and group 1's work, but, you know, when these were things we're developing in parallel rather than as a specifically packaged together set. And I think, you know, with just a small amount of effort, they could be packaged together well to make sure they're all connected and kind of lining up in terms of, like, he has Dave has this list of 10 items, which we only had a couple on our slide, which may have been like a larger subset, but I think even just combining those would make for a nice packaging.
Yeah, I think one nice thing about the 3 groups working in parallel, though, is that the groups had sort of very different audiences and purposes. So I agree that finding more synergies makes sense, but I'm also thinking about where each group wants to go next and how collectively we can facilitate each group at reaching its desired audience. So maybe another place of synergy is thinking about collectively as a group, how we can help people disseminate what they've worked on to the right stakeholders.
So then a question for everybody who's here. I know that the 3 groups covered things like the creation of AI, the governance of AI, and the implementation in a classroom, but might be missing who decides which AI to use. Like, that's the group that we haven't necessarily addressed, as well as teaching AI. Are there other categories that people see that might be missing or gaps in terms of what we should address?
I just jump on real quick. One, I think just helping kids understand how AI in society works in general. The vast majority of our kids are not going to be CS students, but they are going to be using this technology the rest of their lives. And that's the same way with classroom teachers. The vast majority of them are not CS teachers. They're going to have to figure out how their children are going to thrive in the world of AI. And so and what does it look like in the future of work, and being able to pare that down into the elementary level all the way up and scaffold it up to the high school level. So I think that's something I just see missing across the board, where how do you start that discussion? And the other piece that, first of all, kudos to this work. I know when we started our job 2.5 years ago in the UK, it is so refreshing to see a group like this has taken our work and other people's work and just have gone so far with it. I'm so impressed with it. But one of the things that I would like to think about is we have people on here who live and breathe AI. The rest of the society doesn't. And so how do we package this so it's digestible for the common educator or legislator? Because most of the stuff I'm seeing here, even right now, it's not packaged in a way that most of them are just not going to be overwhelmed by it. And so that's going to take some work looking at those demographics, and especially in the age of COVID, in the day of COVID, where people are so focused and overwhelmed on it right now, they don't have time to look at this. And by the time they do, I'm concerned we're really far down the road. And so I would be interested in what the packaging element looks like before you get to the distribution or the dissemination stage.
Yeah, I
Hi.
agree. And I don't think that our materials, I mean, I think while we said that educators are our intended audience, I don't think the current packaging is suitable for them. But there is a large layer in between that where AI literacy is needed, even to understand some of these issues at the beginning for all of these intended audiences.
Hi, this is Andres Enriquez, Education Development Center. I found this very interesting. I am not one of those people who knows a whole lot about AI. I'm just wanted to learn more about it. And as a person involved in schools and technology, you know, a lot of this stuff that we hear about AI, or at least what some of the school policymakers that you're talking about, and even legislators in states, you might want to talk about issues around workforce and workforce development, and also really the fear people have about AI. Or the misconceptions folks have about AI, I should say, and how to alleviate people about the value of AI and alleviate people's misconceptions about what AI is going to do. I think there's this whole notion around the changing of workforce or the lack of the kinds of vocational CTE skills that are going to be. So I think that kind of grounding or anchoring, I think, really needs to be documented somehow in these conversations. Otherwise, it's coming in as if it's already been thought through, as opposed to thinking about how folks are perceiving it now. I'm just wondering if that's been thought about or discussed, or perhaps a friendly suggestion as to how to approach some of this work.
Yeah, I would like to take that, Andres. That's a great question. And just to give you a little bit more perspective about how Group 3 really started off with, we definitely wanted to focus on AI literacy, and which focused on, you know, misconceptions about AI, as well as what is exactly AI literacy, what is AI bias, and how can students benefit from it? How can we really figure out the fear and trust of AI, essentially, right? So all of these questions came into place, but we definitely thought that that's a much bigger realm and a much bigger domain space, that, you know, there needs to be a separate policy brief on that. So instead of merging the two, our group actually pivoted to integrating the technology in classroom practices and focused on how these various stakeholders could actually be responsible for, you know, unbiased integration of those tools in the classroom. So that's how it led to what we have right now. But I think definitely, you know, AI literacy is another topic altogether, which as a team we have discussed that we will dive into moving forward and work on that. But it's definitely an important question, which is not very explicitly talked about in this policy brief or in any of the initiatives that we have spoken yet.
Yeah, thank you, Deblina. That's very helpful.
One other thing that's just now resonating in my mind after listening to what you're saying, Andres, and the rest of the group, one step before everything that we did may already exist in a newer nonprofit that's doing some phenomenal work in the workforce that you're describing, Andres, and really honing in on how specific roles will be changing due to AI, and down to the specifics. And that gets into the AI literacy piece. And that is actually their target market. So they might be an interesting partner for us to look into seeing if we could partner with them, because they're a nonprofit as well. It's aiedu.org. Incredible folks doing that work. So that might be a way for us to expand and then build upon the work of others and pull in more aligned to the vision.
Yeah, I think NSF has funded two, I'm sure you all know, the two big centers on AI in education, one at CU Boulder and the other one at Carnegie Mellon. I think it was AI K14 and the other one is, I'm forgetting what the other one is, but both have been substantially funded just to figure out the issues around K12, maybe K16, but I think K12 is the focus. But part of this is probably this discussion, to your point, Tricia. And I think circles would be really good to involve in that, given their connections to NSF, et cetera. And they're NSF funded, you know.
So I think we're running out of time, or 1 minute over. So maybe that's on that note. It's a good time to close the session. I think we've all gotten a lot to think about in terms of how to move this forward. And kind of how to bring the resources that we have to bear in terms of advancing this even more. And we welcome to hearing from everybody after the session as well. I know now we're moving towards the delayed opening session. Leigh, I don't know if there's anything else to say about that.
Yep. So first, thank you all for presenting and for listening and engaging in this discussion. We also have a strategy session tomorrow at the convening focused on AI and ed policy to talk a little more broadly about our community's involvement in policy and where we want to see it go. And so, yes, now we're going back into our welcome and announcement session for the convening at the end of the day. So hopefully you can join us there. And to get to that, you just go back to Swapcard, look at the agenda, and it should be there for you at 5 p.m. And with that, thank you to everyone for
Thank you very much.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.